like to close the executive session and reconvene the public meeting of September 17th, 2019. The purpose of the executive session was to discuss real estate for consideration of sale, purchase, or lease pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101C. No action was taken by the commission during this session. Before public comment, I'd like to read our advisory meeting schedule. The Marina Advisory Committee will meet Tuesday, October 15th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Commission Chambers, Harbor Center Building, 1801 Roeder Avenue, which is where we are at. The Technical Airport Advisory Committee, TAC, will meet Thursday, November 14th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. ARF Conference Room, 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. The BIAC, Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, will meet Thursday, November 14th at 5 p.m. ARF Conference Room, 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. I'd like to take a roll call. Commissioner Shepard?
Here.
Commissioner Bell?
Here.
And Commissioner Briscoe is present. Let the record show that all three are here. We will move to public comment. I have one comment that I've been asked to read. The folks were here and had to leave. It says, "Dear Port Commissioners, we are in support of the port providing resources to homeless and low-income families with village, I believe it says, tiny village is just a drop in the bucket for what we as a community must do. Please provide land and resources to help people get off the street." That's from Tom, and I believe it's Ellie Harm, 2228 Niagara Road. I'm assuming Bellingham, Washington. There's a phone number there. We'll keep this.
Is that Unity Village, maybe?
Hey, is that what it says? I couldn't make that up.
Unity, yes.
Unity Village.
Thank you.
Okay, so on public comment, the first person on the list is Dana Briggs. If you'd state your name and address, please.
My name is Dana Briggs. I'm homeless, but I live within the confines of Bellingham. I'm going to present you with a philosophical argument, and the details of this are going to come from a number of individuals that come after me. As you probably all are aware, because you've heard it, we're in a housing crisis within the county, and it's not just unique to us, unfortunately. Ordinarily, you as the individuals who administer on our behalf property that's called the port, you wouldn't have to deal with residential issues. However, I think at this point in time, any opportunity to think outside of the box, so to speak, about where to obtain land to put tiny home villages or any other type of sheltering arrangement is now your responsibility, along with the county council and the city councils of the 6 municipalities. So, philosophically, we need to do this because we need to take care of our sisters and brothers within the larger community of this county. But lastly, since you are administering property of which there is probably large unused amounts of it within the confines of what is considered the port, we have an obligation, or you have an obligation, to in any way, shape, or form find a yes to this. Don't look for all the reasons that we can't do it. Find a way to do it. And when the community is standing before you and asking you to do this, let's hope that we can do it in as efficient and as urgent a way as we possibly can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. One thing I didn't read that I should have, out of respect for everyone who attends the commission meeting, each public comment period may be limited to 15 minutes total. Speakers are asked to keep their comments to less than 3 minutes if possible, please. And you can submit further comments in writing if you don't get a chance to speak to what you want to tonight fully. So the second person I have on the list, Richard Ray, if I'm reading it correctly.
So I'm Richard Ray. I'm the manager of Drayton Harbor Fisheries up in Blaine. And I need to clarify some comments that were made in the last commissioners meeting. We were moved from the South Pier to the North Pier in 2015, August and September of 2015. And the repairs was not done on those docks till there was 2 times, August, September of 2016, and the second phase was September of 2017. And the port and the contractors worked with us and allowed us to continue our business. But in that move, in the 4 years we've been on the dock, we've had to do some upgrades to the dock. Some of those upgrades were needed, such as electrical, and others of those upgrades were required by the port, and those upgrades came to $14,000. So if we were to move back to the South Pier, it would do us no good to move back, and we would lose that money that we've spent. In the 10 years I've been working for Bellingham, Fox, and Drayton Harbor Fishery, there has not been a public dock up there for other buyers to come use. If somebody wanted to buy off the dock, they had to come make an arrangement with Dodds, who owned the 2 piers at the time. When Bellingham went into business 25 years ago, his business model was to buy at Blaine and to use that pier, and that involved renting the pier from the port and dealing with the port, and that rental for our Drayton Harbor business, Drayton Harbor Fishery, comes to about $23,000 a year. Sound Pacific, Boundary, and Starfish have probably the same bills that I do because they have the same business model. Now, you mentioned at the last meeting that there were other Whatcom County buyers who want to buy crab and fish up there in Blaine. I'm only aware of one other Whatcom County buyer, and that is One Ocean. One Ocean set up their business model to buy in the county, or to set up their operations in the county so they didn't have to deal with the port and the fees. Now, I've worked with One Ocean on my dock, and so has Sound Pacific. And it worked for a while, but I had to quit working with them because their operations they brought in so many boats that their boats rammed my boats and ran into the dock, and tempers flared and fights almost broke out because the fishermen got tired of waiting. So the idea to open up a pier up there for buyers to come up and buy who are out of Whatcom County doesn't help the port. It doesn't help us. Right now, if One Ocean comes up and buys, there's also other buyers. AFA and New Day from Port Townsend will come up and buy, as will ABC from Portland. And they already come up during the season. They'll come up and they'll park their truck down by the boat launch or up behind the old subway and buy crab from the fishermen. Because they can pay a little bit more because they don't have the overhead that we do. And so if you bring them in and put them on the South Pier, you're going to be asking for more congestion. And it's been my past experience that when they have that many fishermen fighting over that little space, fights will break out and issues will be had, and you'll be affecting your tenants already up there who have to pay a lease to be up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Next person is Craig Cooper.
Can I stand over here?
That's fine.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Shepard, Briscoe, Bell, Executive Director Fix,
Could you
and
please please state your name and address, please?
Well, I was going to get to that.
Oh, you generally ask for
To
that
get the
first.
niceties out of the way. So.
Okay.
My name is Craig Cooper. I live at 319 South Forest in Bellingham. I'll keep this brief.
Thank you.
I'm standing here to encourage the Commission to move forward, keep the momentum with the proposed marine trade school here along the waterfront. Being a previous marine trades small business owner, my biggest challenge by far was keeping skilled technicians to work on boats. Initially, I worked with the Skagit Valley Marine Trades Program to hire techs directly out of the program. Some of those techs still work on the waterfront here in Bellingham today. In order to stay competitive with Vancouver, Anacortes, Seattle, and beyond, our working waterfront needs a pool of skilled technicians to pull from. Again, I encourage you to keep the momentum with the idea of the Marine Trade School along our waterfront and help support marine trades here in Bellingham and Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Next is Joy Gilliffin. Did I pronounce that right, Joy?
No, but that's okay. It's Gil fell in, like Gil fell in the well or in the water or off your docks or something. Okay. I'm Joy Gilfillan. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you all today. And that's my phone. Excuse me. I can maybe shut it off. It's very rude. But I'm here to talk on behalf of the homeless and on behalf of the lower economic group of our society. I've worked in business for 45 years or longer. And oftentimes, and for the last 40 years or so, we're always focused on going forward, and we're always focused on what's the next cool economic development project. Well, our world has gone through a tremendous shift since 9/11 happened, and since we've started doing global commerce and technology and everything else. And we tend not to pay attention to the parts of our society that are creating resistance and putting a drag on our economic system. The homeless, the poor, the incarcerated, all of those people are actually creating a huge economic drag, and it's costing us, our middle class, it's costing our small business, it's costing everybody. So opportunity costs and being able to recapture the losses that come when entire segments of our society, from youth and middle class, we're losing a lot of people. And if we can take the time, either as an economic development project for the port, to actually fund and look for where can we find property, where can we invest in groups so that we can actually help people recover losses that come from suicides, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, incarceration. These projects are huge, and they are creating a huge sinkhole in our economy, and they're marginalizing small businesses, and they're harming us. So I would invite us to either look at, and I'd be more than willing to come talk with anybody who's interested in talking about it at the port. How can we do economic development that's sustainable? How can we find multiple projects throughout the county in different places where we can actually work to help people recover themselves, or earn their way up an earning or work ladder, build apprenticeship programs, and put people back to work? I've been talking for the last 9 years, since I was actually working on the Four Pillars project here at the port. I've been diagramming and understanding the sick side of our society, the part that is deconstructing. And we can change it, and we can change it now, and there's a lot of political reasons to change it, and there's economic reasons to change it, and we actually have we're going to have different elected officials to work with that can work with you port commissioners. So with that said, I just encourage you, if we can find property, I've got ideas for where we could do it. If we can do economic development projects, we can actually recapture a lot of our losses, strengthen our community, and build better security. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Next, I have Arnold Yuki.
Good afternoon. My name is Arnold Yuki. I'm representing Boundary Fish in Blaine. The reason I'm here today is to address some concerns, or to voice some concerns I had from your September 3rd Port Commissioners meeting. The subject I'm talking about is the use of the North and the South Pier in Blaine. I think we're all pretty familiar with the history of the North and the South Pier. Back in 2015, when the Dodds decided to vacate the North Pier, it presented an opportunity to address a couple issues that I was facing at that time. One being to grow the capacity to service my fleet, fishermen and their families, as well as service my customers. But more importantly, we were facing a logistical nightmare there, because the South Pier, where Richard was at, is at the doorstep of Boundary Fish's property line. So you could imagine both of us having semis and 5-ton trucks coming to pick up product. It could create some chaos. So at that time, when Richard and Mr. Fox agreed to move to the North Pier, that alleviated both concerns that we had there. And since then, things were working great. And when I heard about your meeting discussion on September 3rd, all those nightmares came back when I could remember the chaos out front there. So I'm hoping we could find a different solution there. Further, and this is a great concern of mine over the years, is the integrity of our main dock. We also have a south dock south of the South Pier that we're leasing, and year after year, the bulkheads there have had some severe issues, and I'm just afraid one year something bad could happen there, and it already has to a couple other companies in Blaine. They had their floors give way underneath, and could have been pretty bad. So all it takes is something like that to happen on our main south dock, and we'd be without a dock. Further, I know the port is working towards obtaining the budget to fix those bulkhead issues. And even at that time, that's the best case scenario, but at that time, we'll also be without the main dock, should the repairs be underway. So we would also need the South Pier for those reasons. So I'm hoping with my concerns, as well as my colleagues' concerns, we can come up with a different remedy for this issue. Thank you for your time.
Point of clarification, Mr.
Sure.
Yuki, did you say you were leasing that dock?
The South Pier?
No, leasing your pier that's attached to your building area there? Or did I misunderstand?
No, we're leasing the South Pier.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
And you own the other pier, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jim Peterson?
Hi, my name's Jim Peterson, 5 Sunnyside Lane, Bellingham. I'm president of Homes Now. I'm here for the first time in front of the port. On Monday night, I went to City Council and asked for 2 quarter-acre properties for our tiny home village. On Tuesday, I went to the county and asked for 1. Now I'm here to ask the port for a quarter-acre. We have a tiny home village, if you're not aware of, 210 McKenzie Avenue in Fairhaven. I invite all of you to come down there. We built 21 tiny homes in 25 days. We have 15 people living there right now that are homeless. We could have up to 30 people. Our goal for next year is to have 4 tiny home villages in Bellingham area. 20 tiny homes apiece, all self-funded by private donations. We don't ask for taxpayers' money. All we ask is for property to put these on. We pay for the electric and water and all the build. I have some handouts about this, but what I'd like you to know about our villages, we ran the tent encampment behind City Hall and we ran it over at Sunnyland. The residents that have come through our program, we've housed 30% in permanent housing at no cost to the taxpayers. They did it on their own. My belief is if you give somebody a safe place to be, where their belongings are, that they can go to appointments without carrying all their stuff with them, they'll rebuild their own lives, and that's what we're seeing. We've been at this for 2 years now with Homes Now. We built tiny homes out on Lumley. Then we finally did tents, and this is our first tiny home village. It's amazing to see, like the rainstorm the other day. We were in tents last month. This month we're in tiny homes. Nobody got wet. Everybody's thriving. I don't think a quarter acre is too much to ask. And we're asking for a 1 year to 2 year lease, preferably a 2 year lease. That's about all I have to say. And I've got some synopsis of it. Can I give them to you?
Mr. Peterson, quick question. First, thank you for all that you've done and the work that continues with the projects, and I've heard nothing but great things about the Unity Village. With that project in particular, what is the lease that you have? And do you...
Right now, in Fairhaven, we have a lease until April of 2020. I need to tie up land to move that village by December because of the permit process. And then we'd like to have 4 quarter acre lots tied up. That's why we've come to the port and to the county and to the city. Because we got to start the permit process in December, or we won't make April.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and we are drug and alcohol free. We are a high barrier organization.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Rachel?
Hi, my name is Rachel Duvall. I live in the York neighborhood, and I am Vice President of Homes Now. I'm here today to support Jim in asking for land. I want to talk about the program Unity Village because it is drug and alcohol free. It is a chance for those that have fallen in the gap, the elderly, the middle-aged, those who are either on SSI or trying to disabled vets. We are serving our community that has lost their way. We are giving them the opportunity. I know this because I was one of the residents, and now I am a vice president of the organization because it moved me and it helped me. I found housing in 3.5 weeks. Most of our residents don't get that luxury, but we're working on it. We have a ton of community members who support this, and it is working. 30% is a huge number when you're talking about a 9-month period. So I just want to support that and tell you that our program works for security, for stabilization, for empowerment. Our residents, they do the security, they do the checking people in, and you do have to check in every time you come in and every time you leave. They do security checks, they do weekly resident meetings, we do weekly community cleaning. We interact with the community. We want them to be a part of this. We invite everyone to come down and see it for yourself, see how it works. We have advocates who work with our residents, and they hold our residents hold the advocates accountable too if they don't make their meeting, which is really nice. Jim has a saying, he wants everybody to be held accountable. The city, the government, our neighbors, and the homeless. They have to be accountable too. So we're doing that, and it's working. So I invite you all to come down and please give us a thought in this lease land. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Paul Burrell?
Commissioners, Paul Burrell, Southside resident, commercial fisherman, has 27 years, and a port leaseholder. First, I'd like to say thanks to Andy Peterson and staff up in Blaine for doing a great job for us up there during some tribal crab openings we've had. It gets to be kind of hectic, and him and his staff have done great jobs. I know down in Bellingham you only get bad press from what's going on, but those guys keep us going up there, so help us make money. I appreciate it. The reason I'm here today is to actually speak about what Arnold and Richard said and add a little depth to it. First, I'd like to read the port mission statement. Everybody can see it. It's up on the screen. To promote sustainable economic development, optimize transportation gateways, and manage publicly owned land and facilities to benefit Whatcom County. The reason I want to read this is to make sure that any action by this commission is benefiting Whatcom County's businesses and citizens. The action of making one or both piers in Blaine available for use will actually only benefit businesses that are not Whatcom County based, which is technically a breach of the port's mission statement. None of our companies force fishermen to sell their products in Blaine. I've been a fisherman for 27 years, as I stated, and I've never once been forced to sell product against my will. I also want to clarify that I am a supporter of a multi-use dock with a crane. Fishermen and for fishermen and residents to use in accordance with port policy. But if you let other companies move in and undermine dedicated lease space, undermine dedicated port leaseholders, it's not if you undermine the leaseholders currently, we won't be able to make the same profit margins we can and support the port. Non-port, it's been usual and customary for non-port tenants to use Squalicum Harbor as a place where they can come because there is no current seafood buyer in Bellingham area. I'd also like to address the comment last meeting about lack of reinvestment by tenants in Blaine. This issue is a good example of why all of us are timid of overextending ourselves. I believe it's a common feeling that at any point we may have the rug pulled out from underneath us. Putting this affair aside, I have not lost any enthusiasm for Dakota Creek shellfish. We look forward to the day when we can begin applying for permits. I truly believe that aquaculture will be an equitable match for the Port of Whatcom Port of Bellingham and Whatcom County. Spring investment that we haven't seen for some time. The BC oyster subsector of aquaculture is already a $270 million industry. Aquaculture is globally a $244 billion industry. Estimates suggest that by 2030, aquaculture will require an extra 150 to 300 billion in additional investments to meet projected growth. As we speak, BTC is producing qualified people who need facilities to intern with and eventually work for. I feel we'll be able to keep these people here if we embrace the natural assets of our region and support those who invest in Whatcom County, including our other port lease tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next person is Lynette. Is it Athen or Allen?
Alan.
Allen, very good.
Hi, I'm Lynette Allen. I live at 1213 Whatcom Street, Bellingham. I've been here for 41 years, and I've been advocating for human rights, environmental rights. I've been doing a lot of research, and I kind of fell through the cracks early on, so I do mostly volunteer work. And I want to encourage the port to really get to know what's going on with Homes Now, Not Later, and what's going on with all of the amazing amount of volunteers and people who are donating money, time, energy, skills to helping homeless people, giving them a hand up, helping build community, helping the city of Bellingham in an amazing way. And you really have to look at it, look deeply at it, see what they've done, amount of work, amount of people involved, and how it's attracting more and more people. And I love Jim's dream of 4 villages that are working. They have an amazing track record. And so please visit them, get to know all about this, because I think it would be great. Economically, it would be a better way to spend money and be better for small businesses, be better for business. So please do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. And that ends everyone that's signed up. Do we have one more? Okay. Put my glasses on so I can read. Michael Monahan, is that right?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael Moynihan Jr., and I am currently a resident at Unity Village. So I'd just like to speak on that perspective. I was paying attention to Jim's story for the last 3 years, and it just grew and grew, and they posted the clear green application for the Fairhaven site, and then that's when I knew I was in. I signed up online, and in a short amount of time, I joined the build. I joined the build on day 3. And then for the next 15 days, I watched 15 homes get built in a very efficient, short amount of time. It was pretty amazing. So I guess we're here to approach, if the port has, a 1/4 acre, that this is probably a win-win situation. It'll be a job site that will go very quickly, and there'll be I'd say a very small carbon footprint village in that little plot of land that's assigned. Unity Village, it's not just about the homeless. It's about rich, it's about poor, it's about happy, it's about sad, it's about all the volunteers, carpenters, roofers, electricians, everything. It's about the community came together. It's kind of about the social capital investment and the collective efficacy, almost like what this community had back in the late 70s and early 80s, probably even before that, but I just kind of like to give it that accolade. And I'm familiar with Joy Gilfillan and her efforts. And the Unity Village, in many ways, is sort of a support of helping the bottom up and not just the top down. So thanks for letting me speak on that behalf.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else that hasn't signed up that would like to speak at this time, please feel free to do so. Pete?
My name is Peter Ivisovich. I've been fisherman for last 40 years in resident of Bellingham. Recently, I receiving letters to be evicted from my locker. I still holding the permit of Bristol Bay. I lease periodically. When I feel good, I go in to be a permit holder in Alaska. Last year, I leased permit to the local resident, but not always I do lease to the local resident. Whoever paid more, I lease it to it. So I have the license, and I've been active for 40 years, Bellingham, what they says, mortgage holder and a payer. So I would like that you consider to let me use the locker a few more years till I'm here around. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else? Okay. Move on to the consent agenda.
A motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
Any questions?
No, I have none. I think we addressed mine, right?
I have none as well.
And I have none as well.
A motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
Commissioner Shepard? Aye. Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Let the record show it carries 3-0. With that done, I'd like to just tell the folks in the audience that I, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners, have listened to everything that's been said, and everything that has been said will go to consideration for all areas. I personally understand the plight in Blaine and the issues there. That's why I brought it up. And we certainly will get more information on the projects that have undergone in the city to date and see if we can do something somehow. We do understand the plight of people that don't have anywhere to live. Commissioner Shepard, do you have any comments to add?
We typically will have time for more discussion at the end of our meeting is when we bring up new business, and but I do appreciate what was said. Jim and I attend the same meetings every other week. We and several others with the Homeless Strategies Work Group for the county, and so it is a ongoing conversation that we've been having, and we will definitely continue that discussion about how we fit in our mission here at the port with working on housing availability across the spectrum, and also other services around workforce development and job training is of another interest to me personally.
Commissioner Bell? Thank you for taking the time to come out here this evening and speak to us about these issues. We really appreciate that, because if we're not told and we're not talked to, sometimes we miss things. So thank you. With that, we'll move to our presentations.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Brady Scott, Senior Property Manager for Marine Trades. This presentation provides a status update on the various efforts being taken to plan for and redevelop the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. First, I will update you on the various capital improvement and environmental cleanup projects, and then discuss the planning efforts ongoing. It should be noted that since 2016, the port has invested and budgeted approximately $10 million into the capital improvements related to Blaine Marine Industrial Area in pier repairs, demo and construction of buildings, bulkheads, environmental cleanup, and other improvements. The biggest progress since the last update we provided in March is the construction of the new web house. We were pleased to report that the project is on schedule. The waterfront trail portion of the project is scheduled to open in early October, and the building construction itself is expected to be completed in November. This will allow the tenants in the existing web locker out at the Blaine Marine Industrial Area to relocate this winter and pave the way for the demolition of the older building in spring of 2020. This is significant because it opens up the heart of the Blaine Marine Industrial Area and is a step closer to providing for expansion and other redevelopment activities. Another change since last spring is that instead of moving forward with design on a Phase 3 construction of the Sawtooth Dock, which would have involved a major and costly reconfiguration of the existing pier structure, it's been determined the port should schedule a full replacement of that pier in the future, and for now use the existing Sawtooth Dock as is. There's some consideration for some short-term utility upgrades in next year's budget. And in addition, we'll still be planning to work on the deteriorated bulkhead shoreward of the Sawtooth Dock, which we'll cover in one of the next slides. There's also been a couple setbacks since spring. First, in regards to the proposed Walsh Marine building. You'll recall that this building was fully designed and bid for construction. Unfortunately, we only received one responsive bid, and the cost was significantly higher than the budget. And so at that time, the bid was rejected. In recognition that a successful boatyard in Blaine into the future requires a new building, staff has continued to evaluate how we can proceed with moving that project forward. This has involved adding some money to the project budget, evaluating the changing construction and bid environment, as well as discussions with Walsh Marine on the possibility of modifying their lease agreement. So the next step is to complete negotiations on a lease modification to bring before the commission in October, and then, if approved, to rebid the project. The second major setback to projects at the Blaine Marine Industrial Area is related to the bulkhead improvements. You will recall that we designed repairs of the bulkheads in front of Walsh Marine and in the Boundary Fish area, the area shown in the picture on the top, as well as replacement of bulkheads at the Sawtooth Dock and to the vacant lot to the north, shown in the pictures on the bottom. The designs were completed and the permits were submitted on schedule. Unfortunately, though, we've recently heard from the federal agencies, both National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they do the endangered species consultation for the Corps of Engineer permits, and they've informed us that they're not able to move forward with those permitting processes for at least a year.
Brady, what was the reasoning given for not being able to move forward?
I'm not that familiar with the entire reasons. I understand, though, that they're revamping some of their programmatic things related to that or workload. So that's disappointing. This means that the earliest the construction could start, which is probably optimistic, would be August of next year rather than moving forward with the construction that was scheduled to be done now or thereabouts. We've also been looking at underbuilding bulkheads located on the Boundary Fish and the Starfish lease sites, circled in the picture there. These have been looked at separately from the other project due to the complexity of the bulkheads being underneath the buildings. Our consultants have been helping us design options for addressing these sites, and the results are both good and bad. On the good side is that the bulkhead underneath the Boundary Fish building appears not to be in as bad a condition as the initial condition assessment implied, and so it appears we may be able to proceed with repairs to extend the life of the bulkhead instead of a full replacement. And we're getting full details on that from our consultants soon. On the not so good side is the bulkhead under the Starfish site is somewhat as expected, quite complicated given the associated contamination of the former CK fish site, and the pier condition and the building conditions, as well, of course, the bulkhead condition. So in addition to the bulkhead design work, we've had port consultants working on characterizing the contamination issues, and they're working together with the designers of the bulkheads on possible solutions and alternatives to both address the bulkheads and the contamination. And so that report is pending, and once we get that information, we'll evaluate further actions, including reaching out to tenants to consider the possible directions forward.
Do we know what's under there yet for contamination?
I'd probably, if Ben Howard is here, he would probably be the best to speak on the exact nature of the contamination.
Hi, Commissioners. Ben Howard, Environmental Project Manager. So our consultant just went out and did an environmental investigation, and they did find some petroleum hydrocarbons, it looks like. More of a heavy oil type contamination. They're still kind of going through the data and trying to get the investigation results to us right now.
So is it mostly what's under there is petroleum based, is what, if I'm
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
And is it legacy petroleum or is it new?
It looks like legacy petroleum, yeah. There were some former USTs and fish processing, like a hydraulic press that looked like it leaked in the past.
And you know where those were located?
Yeah.
So you've got a source.
Yeah, looks like there's a couple sources that we're identifying right now.
Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
I've got a question for the previous slide. So the bulkhead under the Boundary Fish pier there, dock. Tell me again the status of that.
All these 4 areas shown here is tied up. We have had designs to repair those or replace those areas, including the one you mentioned. And then that was stuck in the permitting process.
For that one in particular, are we expecting a replace or a repair?
That was going to be, that's designed as a repair. There's, if I remember the details, there's 1 or 2 pilings that need to be replaced, and then we need to get in there and essentially there's gaps in the existing structure that need to be filled. So the problem that occurs in those older bulkheads is sediment, soils escape out and then create sinkholes and that sort of thing. So those can be grouted and replaced, and the longevity of the bulkhead can be extended.
Is it usable as it is with those cranes? Mr. Yuki spoke to the fact that it was, he had some concerns about its usability.
There's over time, been issues with that. The tenant has been doing some maintenance to fill the holes over time, but needs additional work to stop that from occurring.
Okay.
So the gaps in the bulkhead, that'd be the 4x12s have deteriorated and gone away. Is that what you're speaking to? Between the pilings?
Yeah, I believe so. I wish Greg Nickel was here. He's on vacation. He'd be able to speak to this a little bit better, but as I recall, that's one of the issues there, as well as some of the deteriorating pilings.
And this is one of the earliest would be 2020 to work on that, correct? Because that would be the earliest because of the...
And that's optimistic, because what we've been told by the federal permitting agencies is that they're not even going to start looking at this until 2020, which means that we're going to need them to get everything in place by, April or early May, so that we can get this out to bid and have work begun in August. Again, we got this notification from the National Fisheries probably about 2 weeks ago.
Please continue.
And just so you know, we are working with the federal delegation and talking to them about trying to get ours to be a priority in that.
Thank you.
I think I got through this slide. So more information to come soon on the bulkheads under the buildings. Oops. This next slide summarizes the current environmental cleanup projects. As we just discussed the CK Fish site, which is the former tenants where Starfish is currently located, and efforts are underway in conjunction with the bulkhead evaluation to determine feasibility there. The Westman Marine site, down in the bottom of that picture, is located at the current Walsh Marine leasehold. You may have heard that this site is currently in a public comment period for the remedial investigation and feasibility study being done by Ecology. Following that approval, the next step on that project is to continue to work with Ecology on the cleanup action plan and enter into agreed order. And then once that's done, we would get to design the project and go through permitting with the construction possibly around 2021, 2022 period. The work there basically involves capping on the uplands, dredging the contaminated sediments in the marine area, and then also rebuilding the bulkheads and improvements on the site, which will need to be removed in order to do the cleanup work. And that's, of course, dependent on the ecology action and the IFS, exactly how that will be determined. But that'll be a great opportunity to rebuild the boatyard in Blaine in conjunction with the cleanup work. Finally, the Blaine Marina Inc. site is now in the bioremediation and monitoring stage, which involves routine injections into the wells installed on the site. So we're kind of in a 4-year period where we'll continue to do that from time to time. But other than keeping the access to the wells open, it's a fully usable site.
And we're monitoring that currently. Do we have any kind of results on that yet?
Let me defer again to Ben. He's most knowledgeable about that.
Yeah, so Ben Howard, Environmental Project Manager. So yes, the cleanup happened last year, so the construction project where we did the kind of the mass removal. And in the last year, we have, constructed their bioremediation trenches. So you do injections, and it adds to the groundwater, some nutrients for the micro degradation. And so the first injections took place, I think in the spring, and the consultant right now is going out there to monitor groundwater. And so we don't necessarily have the first round of results yet to see what's happened, but they are looking at the groundwater conditions. Kind of there's expected some mounding and what's happening with the groundwater flow conditions kind of prior to actually looking at the groundwater results. So, but we should have that pretty soon.
Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
Oops, I guess I was there. In June, the port submitted an application to the city of Blaine to amend the Wharf District Master Plan. That's to do general updates for the entire Wharf District area and to address some of the key changes in the Blaine Marine Industrial area, including addressing the access, the public access corridor through there and moving that. This application is pending with the city review, and we're waiting to hear feedback from them before it moves forward with their public process and coming back to the port for approval. So we expect that to move forward in the coming months. In addition to the update on the master plan, we've been evaluating the access improvements with an eye towards developing a binding site plan for the site to create legal lots of records and to move forward with expansion and redevelopment of the site. So the access improvements, while it's called the access improvement project, it probably should also be considered a binding site plan project because we're using that information to help us define the binding site plan. So far in that process, the consultants have completed the land survey work, and the image on the slide is showing what we're currently working on with them, which is the traffic flow analysis and turning radius details, and this will help us. The next step is to use that information to generate alignments and evaluate what improvements are necessary for access and lay out the binding site plan. Taking the information we gain from the access improvement design will help us determine what access improvements will be needed. And so we're building a conceptual site plan alternative that we can use in stakeholder engagement effort and bring back to the commission, and then move forward with the city of Blaine for eventual approval of the binding site plan. In developing that, we've put several assumptions in. Of course, we're assuming that the Wharf District Plan highlights the highest and best use for the area, including using this area as marine trades, industrial use with some mix of commercial use. And that lies south of the Marine Drive. So that's a city right-of-way that is colored at the top of your slide. The second assumption in developing the binding site plan is that it should be designed around the long-term leases we have, which pop up there on the corners of the site. These are the Starfish, South Pacific Seafood, and Boundary Fish lease areas. The third assumption is that having a boatyard is an essential asset to retain and expand in Blaine. So that's the existing boatyard, and that's a potential expansion area. Fourth assumption is that the Sawtooth Dock use and access for commercial fishermen in its current and future configurations is an essential port asset in the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. So given these assumptions, we're first looking at the access improvements to accommodate those uses, and then with the remaining land, determine the areas available that the port can develop into the future. And that this is conceptual, but that shows a potential traffic corridor. And then these areas would then be the remaining parcels that could be put into a potential binding site plan. Noting that the Dakota Creek Shellfish is interested in developing a hatchery in the area north of the Sawtooth Dock. Boundary Fish has requested expansion to put in a value-added seafood production facility. Bingham Fox with Drayton Harbor Fisheries has requested to do a long-term lease in that area. So given these proposals and requests, at the end of the day, there would be little property available for other uses. These lines here are only conceptual, and more work is needed to consider further feedback and flush out alternatives. So we're in the middle of that process with our consultants. We plan to use stakeholder engagement and commission feedback to ultimately identify and confirm the access areas and the new lot boundaries through the binding site plan process. So to summarize, the next steps in the binding site plan process is to complete the conceptual alternatives, and then undertake stakeholder engagement, get their feedback, continue to get feedback from the commission, and then work towards approving and finalizing the binding site plan. And that ends the presentation.
Brady, could you back up a slide? For that South Pier, tell me about the traffic access. Maybe it's easier a couple slides back. Is that just a back in, back out that's a one-way access without any turnaround? Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, these traffic patterns are for the large semis. And so for boundary fish, the way they typically get in to back into their site is come around and then they have to back down into their site. They also will come down this way and pull in forward and load up in my familiarity with their operations.
Okay. All right. And for the previous site on the wharf master plan, in partnership with the city of Blaine, yes. Is there a particular call out for the need to complete that access way to Jorgensen Pier in this document? Does that, do we get any prioritization, any urgency around seeing that tackled and brought to some completion?
The public access out to Jorgensen Pier.
Correct.
I know it's identified in the plan, but I'm not sure if there's any prioritization, if Greg McHenry has any other information on that.
Not as far as prioritization, no. After last presentation, there was going to be discussion between the city manager and the executive director to hone in on that.
Maybe you could repeat that for us.
So what he said, there's going to be, after our last meeting, the commission asked me to get with the city manager of Blaine, which we exchanged some phone calls, brief conversation before he went on vacation. And the end result of that was that we were going to go to Olympia kind of together using the port lobbyist. He had identified some fund that he wanted to try and get a grant to finish that road. So we'll have more for you when Michael gets back from vacation. But the current plan is that we try and get state money to finish that road.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Bell.
No, you just managed to do something very few can. You shut me up. Because you answered just about everything that I was asking in our last meeting. I just thank you for all of the work you put into this, because that now makes sense to me. Very few people have that ability on me. Thank you, Brady.
So those 3 parcels that you identified as potential for use, we don't have any of the existing tenants, none of the existing tenants have expressed use in those 3 parcels closest to the road. Is that correct?
There's been some discussion about this area to be used in front of Dakota Creek. And then we currently use parking in here. That's another detail we really got to get into, is how the parking needs for all these tenants for their current and future uses can be met. So we got to look at that. But that's also frontage on the Marine Drive, which is potential for commercial activities that fit in with the industrial uses there.
Further questions? Thank you for the presentation, Brady. It was very informative and brought us up to speed on what's going on. I'd like to, at this time, I'd like to take a 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 5:40.
dad.
Oh, dear. Yes.
Exactly. That rings a bell. Okay. So,
I'd like to call a commission meeting of September 17, 2019 back to order. We'll start with public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Anyone in the audience wishing to give public comment at this time in our second part of our meeting? Okay, with that, we'll move to the presentation from the Working Waterfront.
Mr. Commissioners and staff, Pete Granger, Working Waterfront Coalition, 2628 North Harbor Loop Road, number 8. Thanks for the opportunity to report to you tonight about some of the investigations and research we've been doing into maritime training and to invite your comments. I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Granger, one of our board members who has a lot of experience in this area, being a career counselor at Bellingham High School and Squalicum High School over the years, among other things. So Debbie.
Thank you. Let's see here. I'm Deborah Granger, part of the Working Waterfront Coalition. Most of you know me and wearing my Sea Feast hat, but tonight I am speaking to you as part of the Working Waterfront Coalition. I've been on the board since its beginning about 4 or 5 years ago. And I hope that each of you got one of these brochures. We are excited about this. This showcases over 120 members that we have, and our mission is to promote the vitality and economic benefits of our working waterfronts for the people of Whatcom County. And we have been working hard in all aspects of that. Tonight, as Pete said, I'm making a short presentation on the maritime sector education training opportunities in Whatcom County and the work that we're doing in that area. And why are we working on this? What's the need? I'm telling you that most of these members in this brochure are coming to us and saying we need help. And the working waterfront, or this maritime sector, with over 7% of our county's jobs, it is a thriving sector of our economy, and we need young people and we need trained people coming alongside and filling the positions to ensure that it sustains and keeps going. And why would somebody want to work in this area, in the maritime marine environment? And if the curtains were open, you guys could turn right around and see that gorgeous waterfront right out there. And we are blessed in Whatcom County with an amazing marine environment that so many people want to work in that area to preserve and enhance our marine environment. And so we're here to help them find opportunities. And as you know, there are endless career opportunities involving this love of the maritime sector. And I just made a quick blip here of lists of possible careers, of which there are thousands more. And I'm really excited because when I first started this about 4 or 5 years ago, the maritime sector was not an official Department of Labor bona fide sector. It was just amazing to me that it wasn't. So now finally it is, and it has all of these many opportunities. But where does somebody go to get the training that they need to work in the marine environment? And basically there are two basic lanes of education training opportunities. There's actually a third, and that's what a lot of people do, and I'll get to that in a minute, but 2 basic lanes where how you could get trained. One is a higher education related, and that can be publicly funded or privately funded. 4-year, 2-year technical, colleges, higher education. You can also deliver that education in the classroom and online, and in the workplace oftentimes too, or a hybrid of that. But the education usually happens in the post-secondary institutions. And at the end of that course of study, you earn a degree or a certificate of higher education. There's also an apprenticeship, that's the other lane. And that is a combination of on-the-job training and related classroom instruction. And that's under the supervision of a journey-level craft person or trade professional, in which workers learn the practical and theoretical aspects of a highly skilled occupation. So you've got the higher ed and you've got apprenticeship. The third one that a lot of us fell into is just, I'm breathing, I can punch a clock, here I am. It's called on-the-job training, OJT, you know, and I'm sure a lot of us got our fishing skills or work in the maritime sector that way. So in Whatcom County, what is available? So we've got, if you want to do fisheries or, you know, biology related, you could go to the BTC Perry Center for Fisheries and Aquaculture Sciences. And that program, Jay Bornstein lovingly termed that the best of boots and brains, because it's hands-on practical skills in the stewardship of marine and aquatic animals. And those students can earn a certificate or a degree, and they can also earn a transfer degree and go on and get a 4-year degree. Environmental studies policies, if you want to work in that, you can go to Huxley, or Western Washington has Huxley, and you can earn a bachelor's and a master's. This fall, the Salish Sea Institute is offering a minor course of study. And then also Northwest Indian College has a native environmental science program. If you want to work in the marine trades related, Bellingham Technical College has diesel technology, HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration technology, or welding and fabrication technology. You can also go down to Skagit to the Marine Maintenance Technology Program. There's also a series of, or several apprenticeship programs. And All-American Marine is starting one, needing to fill their welding positions. And Northwest Explorations is as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. Why are we involved? Why is the Waterfront Coalition involved? Basically, our members have come to us and said, we need help. So last February, we had our first fundraising dinner, and lo and behold, it was successful. And so we formed an ad hoc committee, and are you bringing me a glass of water? Thank you. We just flew up from San Diego this afternoon and just flew in. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thanks. So we had this fundraising dinner. Thank you, Mr. Briscoe. In February, and it was really successful. So with that money, we decided to, well, we formed this ad hoc committee, and we decided to have two thrusts for that committee. One was to develop scholarships, and one was then to research and develop longer term some programs meeting this need. So in the short term, we actually worked with the BTC Foundation and we established 3 scholarships. We awarded 3 students $2,100 each this summer. 2 were in the fisheries program and 1 in welding. And we get to meet those students in October at a scholarship breakfast. It's a very heartwarming breakfast. And then we plan to invite them to the February 2020 fundraising dinner and have them tell us their stories about what this scholarship meant to them. But the longer term, what were we wanted to research some programs in marine education training programs. So we looked around and said, well, what is available? what's existing right now. So we visited in April. There was 3 or 4 of us that went down to Skagit's Marine Maintenance Technology Program. And that program, we spent a day there and saw that it's related. Like I said, it's in the higher ed program lane. And students pay tuition and they earn a certificate or associate's degree through that program. And it's, Craig Cooper talked about that in his company. He'd hired a graduate of, or 2 of that program. We also, in June, there were 10 of us that went up to Sydney, BC to tour an apprenticeship program put on, an official apprenticeship program in Blessed, Canada. And it's called Quadrant Marine Service Technician Program. And there were 10 of us. And with that, on our team was Ann Avery, and she's the director of the Center of Excellence for Marine Manufacturing and Technology at Skagit. And we had the Skagit instructors, and we had industry members, and then the director of the Northwest Career and Technical Academy, and that's a high school focused vocational program or career and technical education program. And then we've been meeting, and we met as a coalition board of directors, and then we met, our executive committee met with Northwest Explorations, and then Pete, our president, met with Walter Hudzik with BTC, and he's in the room tonight. So we've been trying to reach out and meet and visit with all sorts of partners and all sorts of stakeholders. What's our next steps? In the near term, this fall, realizing that to get a higher education related program in place, it might take 2-3 months at a minimum and sometimes more. We've decided to, our executive committee approved writing a letter of intent to Quadrant Marine Services Institute. And the letter of intent would authorize researching, purchasing, and the adaptation of that quadrant curriculum to the United States. Because that curriculum pretty much is the metric system, and there's some variations, so you have to change it to ours, the US system. That letter of intent has not been written yet because our board meets October 5th, and we need to have that approved at that board meeting. We're also applying for a 501c3 federal tax status to form a foundation. And the point there, the purpose there is to provide support for these kinds of things and perhaps maritime heritage focus. And there's a energy efficient upgrade to engines put out by the EPA, but there needs to be a fiscal agent involved, and people are scrambling to try to find that. So this foundation might serve as that, and then we'd be eligible for grants. But so what is the Quadrant Marine Services Technician program? Basically, it covers 12 areas of study and emphasizes practical skills through competency-based training and assessment. The instructors are marine industry experts with extensive experience. Foundation elements. Basically, the students are broadly trained, meaning they like to say that we teach them about the whole boat, not just the electronics or the mechanics. It's the whole boat. And they're training managers, not entry-level workers. They want these people, after the 4 years of the apprenticeship program, to come out at the managerial level, trained to be managers. And it is offering a competitive strategy for the companies involved. And the basics of it, it's a work-based learning, meaning these students are hired by the company. They are earning while you're learning. They're not paying tuition to and give up 4 years of working. They're earning while they're learning. And then there is a classroom-based learning component, and that's 1 night a week for 9 months for 4 years. And those are taught by industry experts in the workplace, not in a separate building funded by taxpayers. What are the 12 areas of study? I'm just going to go over it really quickly here, and then we've invited John Nasachuk here to answer any questions. I think this is exciting here because hopefully it'll go through this. Yeah. So you can see design. There's 60-some units, 63 units, but 12 main subject areas. So within design, there's 8, and within installations, I'm sure you guys want to look at this later on your own, but there's just a lot of all of these things that most people have just tried to scramble and learn on their own. They are actually learning here and getting certified and documenting their competencies.
Please don't feel rushed. We asked you to come here and present this, so please take your time.
Okay, thanks. Electricity and electronics, and composites. The day that we were up there was a young kid putting gel or putting coating on a boating edge, a railing, and trying to make it smooth and no bubbles and all of that. I'm sure that John can tell us more about all of this. It's very complicated and comprehensive. Wood, all of these aspects. Metals, paint, tools, sailboat rigging, business practices, mathematics, and safety. One of the questions our board had, or our executive committee had, is what's the application of this to commercial fishing and to shipping? And we've been assured that with minor modifications, it's completely transferable to all of those. Let's see here. I was going to close out of this and get back to the... So how would it work in Whatcom County? It's a state-approved apprenticeship program. It has been blessed by the Higher Education Coordinating Board and authorized, and Northwest Explorations, it's my understanding, plans to begin this program this fall with 6 enrolled students, and it might have increased since I last talked to John. And what are we continuing to do? I just think this is an opportunity for all of us, all stakeholders, all 4 higher education entities in Whatcom County, and all the school districts and the industries to get together, and the port to get together and really develop something that that works for all of us. And our board meets again on October 5th. We're also planning to participate with Washington Maritime Blue, which is the state initiative, Governor Inslee's initiative on all of this. There's just a lot of opportunity. And John, would you like to answer any questions?
Happy to do so.
You want to come up? This is John Nasachuk. I met him at that February dinner, and he said, we need help. And I've got a plan for you, he said.
Thank you.
Maybe they have questions first, Deb? Maybe they have
Oh, yeah.
questions
Do you have
first.
any questions first?
Commissioner Shepard.
Sorry for my voice.
That's okay.
Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate all your work on this. For me, this is just a must-do for us here. We've got to get this type of education available. One of our clear strengths in Whatcom County is higher education in all of its forms. And so this is certainly a project we can tackle. The need is clearly there. You've demonstrated it. Mr. Cooper's demonstrated it. I've heard it anecdotally for years. And so what I think is exciting is we have a lot of people who are wanting to see this happen. We potentially have space that we can see to put forward. We have that F Street warehouse, which is designated for marine trades use and water-dependent uses. And if we're able to activate the ability for these employers to be more successful, I would see that as a potential opportunity there. I also toured the Skagit facility, and I was really impressed with what they're doing down there. Getting out of, when I was there, it was a one-year program for most students, and they had 100% job placement. They said it was actually kind of a fight to get their employees often. And so I like that model. The quadrant model also seems to have a lot of benefits, and they don't appear to be mutually exclusive to me. They are serving different sectors of the employment needs. One is more managerial for probably what sounds like existing employees with some experience, and the other is more for entry level, getting into the door, getting boots on the ground kind of employment. And so it's exciting, and I'm just kind of wanting to figure out what are the startup requirements for each, and how rapidly we could expect to see either implemented. I appreciate Walt Hudsick being here from BTC, and hope to keep them involved as a potential partner for moving forward there.
And I believe Northwest Indian College is also starting a program. So it would be great. Like you said, we've got 4 higher education facility or entities in Whatcom County. When we started with this, Ann Avery went with us. Do you know Ann? Yeah, she's really tied in with the state. She maintained that it might take, several months or more to get something going at through the higher education system. Therefore, this apprenticeship model seemed we could do that right away.
Commissioner Bell? Question?
I don't have any questions. I'm done. I've made up my mind. You guys need to proceed, and you'll have our support. And I know if you're behind it, it'll be a quality project, and I know if you're involved, I'm supportive. So no questions, just let's get going.
Did you want?
I'm happy to answer any questions and or give you any further explanation.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Maybe I missed something in there, but it seemed to lean towards managers only, or am I confused there?
There was that mention, but it does not lean to managers only.
Okay, very good.
Just to give you a little bit of background, I don't know if you're aware of an organization called ABRA, but it stands for American Boat Builders and Repairers Association. They were the first group in the United States that got a hold of the Quadrant program and saw its benefit. The president of ABRA took the program, and the 2 states that embraced the program were Washington State and Rhode Island. The program's getting started in Rhode Island, and I'm just very thankful that was chosen to be the designate instructor for Washington State. I'm familiar with the program. I first taught the mechanical aspect of the program 25 years ago, just shortly after it got started. And I firmly believe in the program, and I probably have just over 40 apprentices signed off under my signature that have gone through the program at companies that I have represented. Very thankful for the ownership of Northwest Explorations, who have given us the go-ahead, and that they will fund the first year. You might say we're the lead sheep, whatever you want to call it, but the idea is to get it going, and for whatever stumbles we make in our first year, to show how the program will work to other companies, and then the desire is then to open it up to other companies for apprenticeships in 2020. But at this point in time, it looks like we'll be putting 8 students through the first year of the apprenticeship program. The first year of apprenticeship program takes entry-level students. If I want to find somebody that takes the program in days gone by, where I have run the program for other companies, I would go to high schools, and I would sit in the parking lot in a high school, and I would look for that two-door Honda that's slammed. It's down on the ground, and it's got pipes, and it's got wheels, and you know that there's a gearhead driving that car. And so they have the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey program, and you go and you say, what are you going to do for life? Oh, I don't want to go to university. Well, that's the kind of people that we would love to bring in and have them earn while they learn. It's a graduated wage program where you know where you're going to start. You know that every 6 months you get a 5% increase, provided you're performing. And at the end of 48 months, you're at a journeyman's rate. When you graduate the program, you graduate with an MST. It's called a Marine Service Technician Journeyman's Certificate. And then you start to grow from being just a journeyman. So you come out of your apprenticeship and you're a journeyman, and then you start to grow with responsibility. Under the ABRA program, they're adding the Marine Service Manager training, which has been going now for 5 years. And then a technician can take the MSM, Marine Service Manager training, and they can learn how to move from blue collar to white collar and go into the management aspect of it. So we're setting a trajectory through the apprenticeship program that will take them from hardly knowing what an open-end wrench is right through to a journeyman status. So right from entry level, right through the management, through the years of the apprenticeship program. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and I would like to say that I'm glad to finally hear that we're going to get back to you. Don't start at the top. You kind of start maybe a little lower and work your way up so you have some knowledge when you get there to that management position of what it takes for the guy that's down the hill doing, most of the work. It's refreshing to hear that. My other question would be is, how can we do this faster and bigger, and how could the port help you do that?
Through the year of the trial program, first year at Northwest Explorations, we hope to be able to develop the answer to your questions. Right now, I don't have any suggestions as how you can help us any more than you already have. We appreciate the encouragement you've had to the Working Waterfront Coalition. I love the fact that the Working Waterfront Coalition has put their hand up to be stewards of the program. They all care about the waterfront. They care about people working on the waterfront. And we'd love to offer this as an avenue, not a replacement for higher education, not a replacement for the boat school down in Anacortes. Just as a matter of record, we currently have 7 employees that are graduates of the boat college down in Anacortes, and they've all viewed the curriculum that comes with the quadrant program. And they understand that it's not a replacement for what they had, but it takes them from that level and puts them into a fully professional level at the end. So we're pretty excited about offering both. The boat college is turning out about 15, 16 people a year. In Canada, there's 3 campuses for quadrant, one in Vancouver, Sydney, and Nanaimo. Each of those campuses, they're turning about 15 out a year. It seems to be sort of the magic number. Anything more, the classes are just getting too big. And anything less, it starts to be financially not quite functional. But around that number, so it's not big numbers. But in Canada, they've been going for now 25 years, just over 25 years, and have turned out an excellent, complete replacement for the aging workforce that was there when the program started.
So the first part of this is going to concentrate on which particular area?
The first year is an entry-level year. It teaches you everything from the simplistic thing of how to use a crescent wrench, how to use a ratchet, when you walk up to a table saw, how not to cut your fingers off, all the fundamentals that you need to actually have a safe working environment in a repair shop environment in the marine industry.
Well, it sounds like shop class used to be in high school.
It starts at that level because we're finding that there's a lot of kids that are coming out of grade school that when you say to them, hey, have you run a table saw? And they say, a table what? We have found in the program as it's been developed in Canada that we have to start very basic. But on the same token, when they start really getting into the technical aspect of the classes in the second year, we are very comfortable that they know how to work in a shop environment without getting hurt.
Well, thank you. I have no more questions, and thank you for being here and taking the time to be here. Do we have, gentlemen?
Just one quick, just tell me about the funding model a little bit more. So is this cost fully borne by the employer, or is this a tuition model in addition? How's this working?
We don't have that scoped out in Washington State quite yet. Northwest Explorations has committed to funding the first year of the students that are in our own employ. In following the Canadian model, they felt the first year was sort of about $2,500 per student. We are willing as a company with the support of the ownership to get this first year started. My sincere hope is that within the next 2 to 3 months that all of you and the commission basis will be invited to observe a classroom session and to see the shop where these kids are getting taught. We're willing to commit to the first year so that we can prove the model and develop firsthand knowledge of what the real cost is, and then figure out through the first year how to create a funding model that'll work.
So I'm understanding in layman's terms, you folks are going to foot the bill?
That is a correct statement, sir.
Okay. Employee sponsorship to start with, and then you're going to try and figure it out next. Okay.
In Canada, it has always been employer sponsorship. It was about 6 years ago that it actually became recognized as an apprenticeship program by the provincial government in British Columbia. And when it became recognized, there was no cash incentive, but there was a tax incentive to both the student for their portion of the tuition, and also a tax incentive to the corporate body for sponsoring students through the years. So it's majorly been participation by the student and participation by the company.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Bell, anymore? Thank you.
So that's the focus of the letter of intent that the Working Waterfront Coalition has been asked to write. A letter of intent, 2-quadrant, and that would be authorizing the research into all of the funding and the adaptation of the curriculum to the United States. We have not, the EC, the Executive Committee, has approved that, but we need to take it to the board, and we meet on October 5th. So we'll do that, and I'm sure they'll bless the writing of that, and then we'll start the research and the really good in the trenches work. But that's where I'm encouraged to hear tonight that the port is willing to maybe come alongside and help support or that research anyway. And we'll come back to you with what our findings are.
I think I can speak for my fellow commissioners at this time. In fact, I'm sure I can, that the port is on board wholly with this, and anything we can do to help, please let us know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I also wanted to echo, John, that there's other companies on our waterfront that are very interested in partnering with Northwest Exploration. So it's not just them going it alone.
Commissioner Bell.
No, and I've got a big interest in making sure BTC is involved and some of the other trade schools. So we want to help.
Great. Thank you so much. And I apologize for my voice.
It's okay.
And thank you for the water.
Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
Presentation, and the work put into it.
I don't know. I thought you were going to do it.
Let me do it here. It usually is an X up here.
There we go. Thank you. Right there. All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Andy Peterson, Blaine Harbor Master. This evening, I wanted to provide you an update for some of the, for the artwork that we're planning on the end of the new web house we're building up in Blaine. As you may recall from our discussions on the project, we're planning to do at the end of the building, we're planning to do a photo mural of a salmon cannery label. And this end of the building facing downtown Blaine was actually the select site for that, since it was visible from the sidewalk and the promenades in downtown Blaine. And we're getting ready to develop that artwork. So what I'm doing here tonight is just giving you a quick update, giving you a chance to look at this one more time before we push forward on this development of this artwork. So we looked at quite a few designs of the old historic cannery labels. And as part of that process, reached out to Drayton Harbor Maritime, which is our local, the Blaine Maritime Historical Society, basically. And they were able to provide this as an example of what one of the old cannery labels would have looked like. And this particular label, actually, we found out, dates back to the first cannery that was located in Whatcom County at Semiahmoo Spit. So there's a lot of elements in this particular label that were very interesting. They seem to tick a lot of the boxes connecting Blaine and the canneries that built Blaine. Since this was the first one, and as a side note, this cannery actually developed into Alaska Packers, which at the end of its days became Resort Semiahmoo right across the way from Blaine. So there's a lot of history to this particular one. Oops, excuse me. Well, I guess I'll move forward here. So this is a rendering of the building, what it will look like. You can see there in the left corner of the building, you can see what the label would look like from the promenades in downtown Blaine. We do have some low impact lighting on it, so you'll be able to see it at night. And our goal is that that not only does this connect Blaine Harbor back with its history, but it'll be a point of interest to people in downtown Blaine, drawing them down into the harbor and kind of exposing their curiosity to the history of Blaine Harbor. So with that said, we just wanted to give you guys one more peek at the artwork that we were looking at and get any input from you.
Commissioner Shepard.
No comments. Look, I like it. Looks nice. Thank you.
Mr. Bell. No. Well, I have some.
You bet.
I think it's great. I think that you've done a good job of finding the appropriate label. But maybe we need to do a little bit more along that wall with, say, such as we've done with the art, explaining things on our harbor walkways as to the history, maybe a little bit of that label and what it pertained to. So, I mean, looking at the label is great, but you just explained the history to us, and it helps. And so if we could maybe have something in addition to that that explains what that label means.
Are you thinking like a plaque or a sign or something?
Plaque or a sign or
absolutely.
something with the explanation on it of what that is so that people understand what they're looking at, and then maybe directions to the Jorgensen Pier they could look across. I'm assuming that we're talking about the
That's correct.
cannery. They could walk to the Jorgensen Pier and look across at the site where this label started the canned fish business there.
Absolutely.
So just an idea.
Absolutely, thank you.
But other than that, great job, and I think it will do exactly what you said it would.
Great, thank you for the support.
Maybe we can give them directions to packers so they can go have fish underneath the cannery. Just saying.
Under the cannery?
Thanks, Andy.
Motion by the commission to approve resolution number 1384.
Evening, Commissioners. Noah Carlson, Property Manager for the Port of Bellingham. Today we are asking the Commissioners to approve Resolution 1384. This declares the building located at 3710 Williamson Way as surplus to the Port's needs, as well as approving the sale of the building and amending the 2016 Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements. Excuse me. This would apply to the building and doesn't apply to the land there, which, so 3,768 square foot building. Pursuant to the RCWs that are required, notice was published in the paper 2 consecutive weeks in a row. And last meeting, we opened up for a public hearing to hear the public's comments. And at that time, there were none. The lease between the port and Rover State Over Inc. offers an option to purchase the building, and the tenant has exercised this option. And if the purchase goes through, if they're able to purchase the building, they do intend to continue with improving the building, and such as the roof, which is in the upwards of $40,000. One thing to note is that if this is approved and the sale of the building does not close, this resolution will be null and void. It's staff recommendation at this time to approve this action. Thank you.
Commissioner Bell.
Nope. I'm ready to approve.
Commissioner Shepherd.
No questions.
Thank you.
No questions.
Thank you.
Motion by the commission to approve resolution number 1384.
Commissioner Bell. Yes. Commissioner Shepherd. Aye. Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Let the record show the vote carries 3-0. 3-0, I guess, not 0.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve a renewal and modification of lease between Rover Stay Over Inc. and the Port of Bellingham for premises located at 3710 Williamson Way in the Airport Industrial Park.
Again, Noah Carlson. And this renewal and modification ties in with this purchase and sale. They are up for renewal, and it's for a 3-year term. Beginning retroactively to July of 2019. The rent for the land, which is approximately about 25,000 square feet, will remain the same for the first year, which is $5.50 per square foot with a 9% rate of return. And the rent for the building will remain the same at $1.20 until the purchase and sale agreement, that purchase goes through, in which case the modification allows for the building to be removed from the lease premises and adjust the rents accordingly. One thing to note, years 2 and 3 will escalate at 3% for the land. Excuse me, I missed that point.
Commissioner Bell.
Yeah.
Nope.
Ready, Commissioner Shepherd.
No questions.
I have none.
Okay.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve renewal and modification of lease between Rover Stay Over Inc. and the Port of Bellingham for premises located at 3710 Williamson Way in the Airport Industrial Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Let the
Thank you, Commissioners.
vote carries 3-0.
Commissioners, this next one is me. Previously, we moved the October 15th meeting to October 22nd. I believe that was at the request of Commissioner Briscoe for fishing reasons way back in January. So that probably may not be applicable anymore to what your plans were, but we're going to keep that schedule to the 22nd. And we're requesting another move, which is October 1 to October 8. And the reason for that is that Commissioner Shepherd and I will both be attending the Allegiant Conference with Allegiant Airlines and talking to them about increasing routes to Bellingham, talking about the success of the Anchorage route and how good that's been, and maybe making that go year-round, throwing Tucson in that conversation, and a whole host of other things that we need to go down there and discuss with them.
Good. Commissioner Shepherd, any questions on that?
I would prefer to be here in person for the meeting.
As I would prefer you to be here.
Attending from the cloud is always fun, but not really.
No.
It makes people look up.
No.
And I'll actually be in Pittsburgh that weekend, and actually it gives me an extra day to spend with a relative, so I'm in favor of this.
So I would like to have our commission present as much as possible. Things take us away, and
Would you like me to read the motion?
yes.
Okay.
She's moving me right along. That's enough.
I'm learning.
I believe you were done.
I guess. I'm going to give you the gavel.
Amend the 2019 schedule of regular commission meetings approved by the Port Commission in January 2019, changing the October 1st meeting to October 8th. The commission previously approved October 22nd instead of October 15th.
Commissioner Shepard. Aye. Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye, carries 3-0.
Thank you.
So while we're still on the meeting
Yes, sir.
stuff here, I believe we've got, we're thinking about the Northwest Fairgrounds on the 22nd, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned that. So we're, in addition to moving the meeting from the 15th to the 22nd, we're trying to schedule it out at the Northwest Fairgrounds. They've got a building out there we can use. We can tour the Berry Lab beforehand. So we will publish the meeting to start a little earlier, and anyone interested can show up and we can tour the Berry Lab with those folks. Then we'll set up our meeting out there, have it out in Linden. And this is something past commissions have discussed. I probably haven't had this conversation with this commission, but I think once or twice a year, we'd like to go remote and, do one in Blaine and do one out in Ferndale, et cetera.
Do we need to pass a motion on that, or?
You don't. We'll just publish the meeting as those locations.
Okay.
It'll have to be, if you want it to be a regularly scheduled meeting, then you have to change the regular schedule, otherwise it's a special meeting because you change the location. Does that make sense?
So you're asking them to take action?
I would
think we would have
the location of the October 22nd, 2019 regularly scheduled meeting to
The Linden Fairgrounds, okay. So the motion, if I got this right, is to move the October 22nd meeting from the Harbor Center building here in Bellingham to the Linden Fairgrounds.
I second.
Discussion on that?
Oh, I can't make the motion, so you can't second.
No discussion. Sounds like a good idea.
I'm in favor.
Then we can
That
call
way
a
it's
second.
a regularly scheduled meeting, not a special meeting.
Regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell. Commissioner Briscoe's yes on that.
Oh, we're voting now, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
3-0.
Thank you.
One other housekeeping item, as long as we're on meetings, is that we are having our budget retreat on the 25th, right? So that's a week from this Thursday, I believe, or tomorrow, a week from Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. So on the 25th, and it's over at the Squalicum Boathouse.
Yeah, it's from 8 to 12, correct?
Correct.
So one other thing before we go to other business, if I could, Sunil, could you come forward and tell us about what you and your great staff did in those severe thunderstorms we had, and how the Bellingham International Airport kind of had a shine in all that storm?
Thank you, Commissioner. Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation. We had some significant thunderstorms here, I believe the night of the 7th and into the morning of the 8th, early morning of the 8th. The thunderstorms were much more severe in the King County, Seattle area. And Bellingham International Airport is a designated diversion airport. So we received, I believe, 7 diversions, Alaska Airlines diversions to our airport in a span of 3 hours. We had 2 Airbus A320s, 2 737-800 and 900 series aircraft, and 2 Q400 aircraft. The 4 larger aircraft departed. The 2 Q400, which are 76 passengers each, remained overnight, with the passengers then being transferred to rental cars, the ones that wanted to rent cars, and the others to buses, and sent down to SeaTac in the Seattle area. Staff performed very well. There were no issues within the terminal. We had a power outage during that time. The terminal was running on our backup generator for about 4 hours. But the customer reaction was that the service was exemplary, so staff should be commended on a great job.
Thank you, and I do commend our staff on doing a great job. I heard from some local folks also about that, and they had those people said they had some very good experiences. So to Alaska Airlines, I say this: obviously, it was a sign from the man above. Maybe you should come back home to Bellingham. Commissioner Bell, do you have anything to say? Commissioner Shepard, do you have anything to say? Sunil, thank you very much, and thank you for the job you do at our airport.
Thank you, Commissioner.
With that, gentlemen, we'll move on to the fun session, other business. Commissioner Bell?
Just have one thing on my plate today.
No.
Yep.
Somebody
And
get a thermometer, I think
This
you
is
do.
something that goes back to the campaign days that I promised to take a serious look at. And that is a move for this commission to jump to a 5-member commission. And I'd like to take a serious look at that at this time and possibly schedule it for a October, the second meeting in October review and possible action. But I think it's time to maybe take a look at what that means for this county. I think it's a more stable environment. I mean, I'm looking at the pros and cons, but I don't really get the real feedback I need until it becomes real. So I'm looking to make it real for the next short period of time so that we get real feedback on whether or not this is a good idea or not. And I did make a promise that I would take a look at it in earnest, and I think it's time to do that. I understand that there's downsides to it. I think, you know, commissioners can talk and set an agenda early and come to the meeting, you know, with a preconceived notion, having talked to each other. So that's the downside. But I do think the upside is it would improve communication. I would have liked nothing more than to have you walk around Blaine with me at some juncture and not have a public meeting with that. I also think it's a more steady and stable structure. I think somebody can be gone and it doesn't disrupt the entire structure of the port. And I think it increases the diversity. I think we'll bring in, as it stands now, you have two of us that are basically living in the city of Bellingham, and we don't get much rural representation from that structure. But I do think the 5-member commission would give us a little bit more diversity in our membership. So I want to take a look at both the pros and the cons, and I want to hear from everybody who has an opinion on this, just to see if it is a good idea. And I would like to at least, you know, take the next 30 days to have that discussion with people in earnest, and with you guys in earnest, to see if it's wise. But I do want to see if we can't bring it forward in the next 30 days. I was going to bring it up for tonight, but I do want to take about 30 days to have at least 2 meetings to have a discussion about it and bring it forward. So that's my other business item.
So do you have comments on that, Commissioner Shepard?
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Bell. I appreciate it. It's something that perennially comes up in conversations that I have with individuals throughout the county of why still a 3-person commission when the county council and most of the cities reflect differently. I think it's a prudent step to have a public hearing so we can get opinions, hear some of those pros and cons. I share them too. I certainly see both sides of the matter, but I do recognize a large advantage to being able to have more robust conversations with my other commissioners, which now, as everyone knows, we can't text or pick up the phone or do anything else, and we strictly adhere to all of the requirements of the state in following those directives. And it would certainly help my ability to know what everybody else is doing and wanting to do and wanting to see accomplished, to be able to have that level of communication. It's something that continually comes up in the public, but it's also something that I think the public doesn't know a ton about, the implications. And so that's why it's important to have a more open and robust discussion about what are all the benefits and costs and complications and challenges as well. So thank you for bringing that up. I would support that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be talked about. It was talked about when I ran for office. I was asked how I felt about that. And there are pros and cons to it. I think that possibly for part of this discussion, we should have on hand the cost differences to the Port of Bellingham when we add 2 more commissioners, because that will definitely be a part of it. Either way is fine with me. I see advantages to 3. I see disadvantages to 3. I would assume there's advantages to 5, as you say, with more input. But it always comes to mind when you have more input, it takes more time. There's usually more arguing. and sometimes it takes a lot longer to get the job done. I've always thought that if you have the correct people in place, which I think we do now, that's my personal opinion, we get things done. So I welcome the discussions, and I will adhere to whatever the people's wishes are, as I always do. Commissioner Shepherd brought up some valid points about being able to talk to each other. However, on the other hand, sometimes not being able to talk to each other is almost as good as being able to talk to each other, because you can kind of concentrate on what you're doing and you don't have a lot of things or phone calls or arguing or discussions ahead of where we're at right now. When we can only discuss here, it's transparent and it's right in front of everybody what we're talking about. So there's that positive side to having three. So, but I welcome the input and the discussions, and they need to be had. Is any other business, Commissioner Bell?
No.
Commissioner Shepherd?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm wondering, we're for a little update on how things are going at the granary. Rob or someone else, could you tell us about the status of where permits are going for that, and when we expect to see a variety of different uses made available?
Yeah, so Harcourt is under permitting for the first floor bathrooms, which allows them to get this kind of mini market in place where they have a number of different vendors selling different food and beverages. They have also under permitting for the tower, which they've secured a salon tenant for. There's a yoga studio operating under their temporary occupancy certificate on the third floor of the granary building. The second floor, they're in discussions with a Seattle-based company about co-working space. I think those discussions will probably end up in a lease. And the remaining piece is the annex, and I'm not sure where they're at with the annex. I know they had a number of restaurants they were talking to. We talked to them last Thursday. They had one restaurant in particular out of the Seattle area that they were trying to get to a closed lease with. I suspect that all these things will come to fruition, somewhere close to the end of the year. Their schedule with the port means they have to have a full occupancy certificate by the end of the year, and whether they make that or not, it'll be up to them in the city of Bellingham. I don't know where they're at with that, but we will need a full occupancy certificate by December 31st, I believe.
And what does that mean exactly? Full occupancy, that the building is leased out fully? Or
No, it means they have a certificate that they can lease it, right? They're fully permitted, their building's done. The city has signed off on the improvements they've done to the building, and tenants can move right in.
Okay, so that's the assumption that we're working under.
Correct.
And originally, several months ago, probably at the beginning of summer, we were told to expect the bottom floor, hopefully by the Thanksgiving, Christmas retail season. It seems like that's going to be pretty challenging here.
Yeah, I don't know what they've done. I haven't been inside the building for a couple months. I don't know what they've done on that ground floor, but yeah, restaurants don't pop up overnight. You have to buy equipment and you have to build them. And so just getting the permit to be able to do that is one thing, but to go in there and do it is, get the work done is a whole nother, and it's a little bit more time consuming. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on that from anyone?
Can you say container village?
Staff are working hard on trying to develop that concept. We like the idea, and we think it's got a lot of merit.
I like the pressure. Yeah, I've got a couple others. We had a number of people speak to us about housing today. Frank, can you tell us if providing the ask we had today was a quarter of an acre, to find a quarter of an acre for 6 months to 2 years? Is that within our legal charter that we can do?
So we look at three things. We look at Article 8, Section 7 of the Constitution, which talks about gifting public funds, but provides an exemption for essentially infirm, poor, to handle that. So all governments have that right. Then we look at Chapter 5308 of the Revised Code of Washington, which is essentially where all the port powers reside. And then the third thing we look at is this commission's appetite for pushing the envelope. Okay, so Over the years, ports have expanded their thoughts on what they could do, sometimes not successfully, as far as the state auditor was concerned, sometimes successfully. The problem with direct housing, or a potential problem, I should say, is that it's not within the port's mission. You know, if you look at the port's powers, it's economic development, it's infrastructure, and these things started in 1911 and have been added to over the years, trade and tourism, docks and wharves, airports. There is no housing in there. However, I can tell you that in 2005, there was a question whether mixed-use developments could be done on port property, because at that point, nobody had done one. So I think housing is getting close to the edge of the envelope. Workforce housing is a better idea, because workforce housing is closer to economic development. So I'd like to give you a definitive answer, Commissioners, I really would, but this is a topic of debate at the port statewide level, and many think it may be a bridge too far, because it really gets into something that's not within the port powers. Now, one could construct an argument that, well, it's economic development maybe, but we're running into the issue of what's the state auditor going to say.
Okay.
So, it's clear as mud right now. It is easier for the port to enter into an interlocal agreement with another government. See, if you look at counties and cities, they are general purpose municipal governments. So they have the authority to do everything that is not prohibited. If you look at fire districts, port districts, PUDs, all of which we represent, they are limited purpose municipal governments, and it's the exact opposite. You can only do what the legislature allows you to do. So let me give you an example. We represented a fire district that had a great idea. They were going to do a health clinic in their fire department so that the local people could come to the fire district and be seen by an EMT or maybe a paramedic. Problem was, there is no authority of a fire district to run a health clinic. And the auditor said, you can't do that, you need to go to the legislature. So now if you read in the legislation, you can have a health district, a health clinic in your fire department if your fire department's bound 3 sides by water and the 4th side by the Canadian border. And so if you happen to be in a fire district that qualifies for that,
How does that work?
you can, because it was a good idea.
That's called Point Roberts, yes.
Yeah, okay, right.
Fire District 5, because it was a good idea. So the Port of Seattle has tried to run a cold storage, and the state auditor said no, and the court said no. So, this port was a leader in trying to push internet access at one point, and then the legislature came back and said, okay, you can only do it on a wholesale basis, not on a retail basis. So there is this kind of give and take, and this is a big issue now throughout the state. But I would have to say right now, without further research and just asking the question, but kind of knowing the statutes, that this port would be pushing the envelope if that was the case for direct housing, because the lease purpose is not really a purpose that falls within port purposes, unless you, commissioners, determined economic development or trade or tourism or something like that. As I said, workforce housing is a little bit easier, especially with the changes to 5308245, which is the economic development statute. I was listening to the people talking about the marine trades. The legislature just expanded those powers for exactly that, for apprenticeship development, workforce training, that kind of thing in the last legislative session, 2019. So,
well, that's interesting. Well, what I think is really, to your point is the public here today seemed to make a connection to economic development. And
correct.
We, at the request of the county, the port and our economic development team is managing a committee of the largest employers throughout the county that are participating in a monthly committee around economic development needs and opportunities. And the number one thing that committee decided to work on first was housing.
If that's workforce housing, it's much safer. As you know, commissioners, I can tell you basically where the law sits, and then the law is made by commissions throughout our state. Not, as you know, I'm the general counsel to the Public Ports Association, by taking actions. I remember years ago, there was a port in eastern Washington that made a golf course. And everybody said, well, you can't do golf courses. And the state auditor said, well, it was in relation to a business park where the people who rented places in the business park would want to play golf. So, but there's other times where the auditor or the attorney general say, no, absolutely not. We're not going to go there with a limited purpose government. So I think that's the main idea, that we're a limited purpose government compared to the city and county, which are general purpose governments. And so there is a fundamental difference in our basic authority. We only get what we're granted. They get everything that's not prohibited. And so, like I say, it could be easier to do it with an interlocal agreement between this government and another government, if the commission so desired. So I can't say it's absolutely prohibited, and I can't tell you it's absolutely permitted. It's a perfect lawyer's answer to your question.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think it's more the job of the county health department and the Whatcom County to do. That's my personal opinion, and in my opinion as well, we've seen the city of Bellingham step up and provide a number of different options, and I'm hoping that the county council and the county will choose to make some of those same decisions.
And that's right within their lane of travel, so to speak.
Yeah.
Our lane of travel is, in the ports, is quite different. We also represent fire districts. I can tell you they even have a much more limited authority. We represent public utility districts. They have a certain lane of travel that it's hard for ports to get into. So these limited purpose governments have limited powers.
Yeah.
And could you make a case for workforce housing? Yes. For housing, very laudable for the tiny houses, much harder case to make potentially. But and then ultimately, I turn to Tamara and the state auditor who looks over those decisions. So we wait commission direction, I guess.
How do you guys feel on this one?
Well, would you like to go first? Okay, question for Frank.
Sir.
I mean, I feel for these people that don't have homes. I'm not turning my back or turning my head. I've kind of been accused of that, but that's not where I'm at. I've spoken to Frank several times on this thing. I think we've talked about it before you gentlemen became commissioners. This isn't something new for us here at this counter, if you will, or desk, or whatever you want to call it. I guess a question to Frank for me would be, if we decided to push the envelope as a commission, and we went ahead and did something, what are the repercussions to the Port of Bellingham if, in fact, we are told you can't do that? What happens then?
There's two answers to that question. One is necessarily a financial analysis, and the other one's necessarily a regulatory analysis. So as a limited purpose government of this size, you are audited every year by the state auditor. And they both look make sure your finances are correct and you've complied with federal and applicable state laws. Typically for us, or state and applicable federal laws. The applicable federal laws for us deal with Sunil out at the airport, that we have a bunch of federal laws that we comply with. So what can happen? Well, and Tamara can weigh in here, the auditor can give you a polite warning called a warning letter. Management letter. They can say, don't do this again, or stop this. They can give you an audit finding, which is a published finding that goes out to the press. The port's last audit finding was long ago. Years ago. Governments generally dislike audit findings. And if they believe there's a financial loss, they can require you to recoup that loss. So, and if you don't recoup that loss, the Attorney General, acting on behalf of the port, can bring a lawsuit against whoever to recoup the loss. And actually, that's happened one time with the Port of Bellingham back in 1988. There was a lawsuit to recoup fair market rent not paid by a commissioner at the time, long since passed away. And
Ben Pete.
and there was a lawsuit brought by the Attorney General to recoup $12,000 that they said you didn't pay enough rent, and he disagreed, and they said, okay, we're gonna figure this one out. So that's the repercussions. Beyond that, though, I think generally port commissioners try and get this right, because otherwise the whole system would break down if port commissioners said, well, we can do whatever we want, and they give us an out letter, who cares? I mean, then the whole system of governance really kind of breaks down. But that's not legal advice, that's.
Well,
Cameron,
I
don't
just
know if
wanted
you
to
have
make it
anything to
clear
add
that
to
there was repercussions if we chose to do something.
If I can just interject really quick, we have an incredible bond rating for our size port and for what we do, and that gets us cheaper debt. And an audit finding would reduce our ability to get that cheaper debt. People are less likely to loan money or buy bonds from someone who doesn't take care of their books and play by the rules.
Right, I mean, and it's good we're talking about this, because the public needs to understand it. We're not turning a blind eye or a deaf ear. It's not something we don't want to do. It's something that, and I've explained this time and time again to some people that have approached me, that we're bound by the rules of our mission statement by state law. If the people want to go to the state and change that law at the legislative level, more power to them. And when they do that, we will do what we can and what we're supposed to do. Up to that point, I agree with Commissioner Shepard. I believe the county and the city needs to, and the city has stepped up, and I believe the county needs to step up. And my position is if the port can do something that's within the bounds, within the law, we will do as much as we can as long as it's within the law. And I stand there because of what our legal counsel's advice and explanations that everyone heard, as well as our executive director, of the ramifications to a public-owned port entity here, that we're supposed to look out for the people's money. And if we were to do something like that, it would cost us more money to do business, and that's not what we're here to try to do. But please don't think this commissioner is not interested in helping. It's just we are bound by regulation and law to a certain extent. So that's where
I
I'm.
really would be arguing for quite an extension of the law to do other than workforce housing. But what I'm trying to tell you is, okay, if the commission decides that, we'll construct the very best case we can and move it forward on that basis.
Yeah, Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I guarantee you the Economic Development Committee didn't envision homeless housing or tiny houses as part of their recommendation for more housing. They were looking for workforce housing, and they were looking for middle-class
A couple of
housing.
ports are doing workforce housing. Some of the island ports find it very difficult in the summer because all the people that come to service the tourists have no place to stay, and they're all talking about kind of creative workforce housing out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, workforce housing is much easier, I'm sorry.
Are you done?
I'm done, I'm sorry.
Wow, are you two on the same wavelength tonight, or what?
So from that standpoint, and there's nobody that has a heart for this more than me. I mean, just to let you know, I believe that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. I believe not just the public sector, but I think more importantly, the private sector has a role in this. And I think the private sector needs to step up and play its role in this. But I don't necessarily believe that it's the port's job to take this on at this juncture. And I think there's too many complications. One of them being, I understand what happens in these communities, and there's a lot of liability. So before I'd be comfortable sanctioning something like this on any property, whether it be public, private, or nonprofit, you want to know how it's being run. You want to know what drug testing is in place. You want to know what workforce training is going on inside these, because I believe that getting out of homelessness involves more than just giving a house. It is an addiction issue. It is a workforce issue. There's so much more involved, and it is so layered that would all have to be in place before I could sanction anything like this on the port. We really do want to get these people out of this, and I'm actually trying to, as you are, trying to change this through other avenues. So I don't necessarily think it belongs here. but I do believe it belongs somewhere. And I really do think the private sector needs to step up and play its role. That's where I'm coming from.
And I think some of that due diligence has been done. I mean, the city has had homes now on this is their third location. They've been behind the city hall, they've been out off Alabama, and now they're in Fairhaven. So I think the city probably has worked through some of those liability questions and some of the management questions. And I think Homes Now as an organization has greatly matured in their capacity and their ability.
That's what I heard this evening.
Yeah, and that's what I've witnessed at these bi-monthly homeless strategies work group that I go to as well.
Well, part of the problem is when you bring it into the public sector, it gets politicized. And all of a sudden you're into campaign seasons and you're basically using homeless people as a pawn. And at some level they become vote getters or and it's not stable. It's one of the reasons I hold so firmly in my belief that the private sector needs to come in, because you can put a permanent solution in place that isn't subject to the swings of the next vote or the next election or the next cycle. I just believe strongly that this is not an issue that needs to be politicized. I think one of the reasons that we still spend, multi-millions of dollars in cities is because it is politicized. And everybody takes a political stance rather than what's going to fix the problem stance. I think they're hard issues, I think they're tough issues, but I don't think it's one that can be solved by politicians necessarily. And that would be my problem with, you give them a siting here, the next commission comes along, they decide they don't want them there, the next thing, they're moving. And that's not humane either. There's so many humanity issues involved here that I'd have to do a little bit more.
It's difficult. One issue you brought up, Commissioner Bell, which we discussed at the last homeless strategies meeting, was about the workforce development piece, which is much more in our lane. And one of the issues that was brought up by the Opportunity Council is many of these individuals who are looking for work have a 5 or more year gap in their employment. And that gap in employment makes them less competitive or not competitive at all for being an applicant for some of these jobs. And so there is some potential for an organization to address that workforce training, that low skills, job building for people who are in this situation, to let maybe others deal with some of the housing challenges, and maybe we can look at how we're best suited to address some of the workforce training needs to get people into stable jobs. I always tell people I'm a sucker for the Goodwill's tagline that jobs change lives, because I firmly believe it. And I think that is ultimately one of the most stabilizing factors that an individual can get.
There's no question that I believe that as well. And again, I'll go back to my private sector. I think we need to engage corporate America. I think the Sampson Ropes, the Bellingham cold storages, the employers in the region need to have a say in this, so that when we get somebody clean and sober and we give somebody the training that would come from an outside source, they have a place to go where that employer knows what they're getting. And they're willing to work with us on it, because training them up and not giving them a place to go after that is important. So I think it's a much deeper discussion than just let's train them up. It is let's partner with those employers in the community. And I do think that's best done on the private sector basis, because I think they will team with us. I've got experience in this in Denver. And we teamed up with a number of different employers where those people, once they sober up, go directly into an apprenticeship into employers, and most of them stay with that employer for a period of time. I think you probably all heard this more than once, but the first thing a guy does when he sobers up is he thinks he can be the CEO of Apple. Because all of a sudden he's got clarity. The fact of the matter is he doesn't have that clarity, and he needs that training to get through that. It
needs to be clarified.
Right. And so if we're going to do something in this arena, it needs to be a stable, steady, programmatic approach, and it needs to be based in reality. And that's, like I said, I need to do a deeper dive into what that program looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, all the businesses in this county, the plumbers, the pipe fitters, the just skilled labor, the construction people, they can't find enough people to do the jobs. So I'm with you, there needs to be a program in place. We've got all these people that don't have anything to do, and we got all these businesses that don't have people to do anything with. What the hell are we doing? We need to try and figure out how to bridge the gap and connect them. And I understand, I mean, a lot of the problem on the business side this day and age is the liability problem. You know, you've got somebody that comes on site and something happens, you know, because he's not as skilled or there may be an addiction issue or something and he doesn't have clarity as you speak to. Things happen. So the business folks that own those businesses are reluctant to draw from that part of the workforce, and we need to somehow fix that so that they're confident to draw from that workforce group. And I don't think I wouldn't think that it's that difficult to make happen. And if the port can help do that somehow, I would call that economic development and growth both. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I mean, I'm not anti, let's not help them anything. Let's, if we can help them, give them a hand up instead of a handout, because a handout doesn't work. We know that in this country. Handouts don't work well, but a hand up does. And it gives people pride and dignity. So that's kind of where I'm at on that particular thing.
Okay, sounds good.
Anything else?
Yeah, I've got, let's see, we touched on the opportunity for having our commission meeting in Linden. I really liked the presentation we had last week about the Berry Lab and some of the associated projects up there. I'm glad we're supporting it. And we were at a small cities meeting this morning. Gina mentioned she's been doing a little bit of connection with the USDA about some of their value-added agricultural initiatives and some of their grant funding. And I got really excited hearing that because while I like a lot of what we're putting money towards in Linden, the Berry Lab, I think, has a lot of opportunity to help modernize and change the agricultural practices, get better berries that grow better. The exhibit space is going to be nice. It's not going to save a farm, right? But if we can also think about ways that we could support some value-added processing, that's one of those key issues that I hear come up is it would be great if we had some more value-added processing capabilities so that farmers are able to make a higher premium on the products that they're growing. So I'm glad Gina's looking into that, and I'll really look forward to hearing some more about what options are out there and if that's anything that we're able to get behind and support to make available for keeping these farms as successful and viable as possible for the future. Any questions?
I'll
Yeah.
comment on that.
Sure.
So I think in the last 4 years, 5 years, the port's done a very good job of straightening up and helping with the marine trades and getting those things back on their feet, straightening out problems with our tenants to help them do better. All-American Marine is a good example. I think we've done a very good job in that sector, and now I think it's time to turn our eyes to the East County and the agricultural sector, as I spoke to last week, and put the port's power behind that and make that happen and help them with what they need out there, because that's what this commission is charged with. That's part of our mission statement, and we've had eyes to the Bellingham area and the waterfront. This project on the waterfront over here has taken, 13, 15 years, something like that, and there's been a lot of focus and money on that, and I think now it's time that the port turns its focus to the county. We don't take our eyes off what's going on here, but we turn our focus and our aggressiveness, if you will, towards the East County. And thank you, Gina, for the work you're doing to promote that. That's my comment.
Great, appreciate it, thank you.
Do you have something else?
Unfortunately. There was an article in the paper, in the weekly, that made it sound like the port doesn't have any involvement or commitment or plan around addressing climate change. And I was dismayed to see that, and I didn't think it was representative of some of the work we're doing. So I just wanted to make a statement that our staff has been really engaged in the issue of looking at where we're using our energy, how our energy can be more efficiently used in port properties. We've made some, we really take every energy efficiency grant that comes forward to us for lots of our properties. And we've made some substantial commitments for things like buying 100% of our energy starting next year, I believe. It will come from green sources. So I wanted to just object to some of the coverage, but because that narrative comes up and there's some miscommunication, I thought one good solution to give a little bit more sway and a little bit more emphasis to some of the work that Brian's team, and particularly Adrian, is doing around sustainability is to elevate that to a committee level. We've got a work group that has been working. They're bringing forward some recommendations, and I think it's something that touches so many aspects of our organization that it would be beneficial to have at a standing committee level. So I just wanted to put that out as an interest, and I'll look to staff for their feedback on that, what you guys think about that. But it's something that we're making lots of commitments to, and if the public doesn't know about it, a committee that has outside involvement is one opportunity for us to make sure there is that knowledge and that input.
Commissioner Bell. Yay, nay. So.
I may have a comment later, but I'm still processing.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, because if I brought it up, it'd sound like I'm politicking. And I have heard the same things over the last couple of months. The port's been attacked continuously that we don't have an environmental program in place and that we could do a lot better than we're doing. And maybe we could do better than we're doing. I think we're doing the best at this point in time that we can. We're doing what we can. You can always do better. I think it's important to people understand what the port does environmentally for our climate and so on and so forth. And I would like to study what you said more about a committee. Okay. Sometimes that's a good idea, sometimes it's not. But it's still, people need to understand that the port does a lot more than the mission statement. The mission statement isn't everything we do, and it seems that people think that that's sometimes all we do. So I would concur with what you said.
Okay. I'm actually dumbfounded that article could get written. I mean, that's really the reason I'm searching for words. Dumbfounded that could be the perception because of the work that's been done. I mean,
I don't think it has anything to do more than we're in an election year and people are throwing mud at the port. Because we're just a target on election year. It doesn't matter. It's just
and the evidence doesn't match the rhetoric. So
no, not at all.
That's the reason for my.
Well, thank you. I'll connect more with Rob and about how we move forward on that and some recommendations. So, my last one is just that. I promise it's the last one. Rob and
you said two, didn't you, when we started?
Mike and I know. I know.
Or you're at 7-1.
We went down to the community boating center a couple weeks ago and had a really productive meeting. We had a nice tour of the facility and heard some of their current issues and needs. And the two things that really rose to the surface is need for a restroom on site. Currently, kids have to go across the tracks to be able to wash their hand at a running sink, use a flush toilet. They have some porta potties that they've been making do with, but we've got water and sewer hookups on site. And one of the recommendations that we discussed was the opportunity to put in some of our planning to get a restroom down there for them. That would also provide a hot shower opportunity as well. And the other big need for them is a float that's dedicated for small crafts. Right now, if you're in a kayak, you have to use the same float that everybody else is using, which has lots of boat traffic, and it was really a float that was designed for small boats, that motorized boats, and not for hand-powered crafts. And so we all know There's a long lead time into getting any in-water projects like that, but I wanted to get that on the radar. It's something that the group there really felt passionately about, and both Rob and Mike and I came away seeing some opportunity there.
Question for Brian on that one, and speaking to the lead time for that, if we've got a float, or if we've got overwater coverage we could take from somewhere else on our properties and put a float in that's anchored, not pile driven, that has perforated top, if you will, or whatever, that's not solid, do we have as long a lead time to do something like that as if we drive a piling and we put a float that's solid?
Yeah, Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. It's really on a project-by-project basis, and you heard on Brady's discussion earlier today. And then you throw in these complications with like the permitting agencies not having processing permits. So for right now, I would say count on anything being, taking a fair amount of time. But given a small project like that, if you had some mitigation where you could remove overwater coverage and mitigate for it, it's a lot easier than something where you have driven piles and something that's a permanent structure. But then you throw into that we're also, have ongoing negotiations with the lamination and other things on new projects. So there's a lot of factors into almost any in-water project for us right now. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to look at that and try to pursue it, just recognizing that it's not a slam dunk right out of the gate.
So if you wanted to do something like this and try and get it in place for next spring, would we have to get something off the ground right now to get it in that process?
So I'm going to divide this into two projects. One's the bathrooms, and yes, I believe we can get that done by next spring.
Okay.
The other one, not so much. There's just no way that we can get a permit in place and get floats in place by next.
I wouldn't expect so.
Yeah. We can be looking at spring of 2021, not 2020.
And that's something that might be beneficial actually to have some stakeholder input in the design. I mean, even though it seems like it takes a long time if you were actually working with the community voting center on what exactly their needs would be, rather than trying to do it fast, do it right this first time. So that would then allow maybe to work through some of the permitting though in conjunction with that stakeholder input and design.
Or we can move the Coast Guard, put it over there, huh?
And the site's been very successful getting RCO grants in the past, and that's certainly on the table for what's possible to fund something like this as well. But
and I don't have a problem with
the long lead time, I would love us to get it in the hopper to start thinking now, because it's no one's under impression that's going to happen anytime in a year.
Good.
That's it for me. Thank you for sitting through my lengthy list.
You said 7 to 1. Did you have one?
I have none.
No. Well, I have a couple. I'm glad Gene is here, because I'd like to refute some other things that I'm hearing in the public from several folks as well, and it's in regards to our fiber optics stuff going on in the county. It's been said that verbally and out in public that we're not going to have anything done for at least a couple of years, and it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we intend to have the first quarter of 2020, we will be underway with phase 1 physically.
Gina Stark, Economic Development Project Manager. That is correct. We are scheduled to break ground, I'm saying the summer of 2020, to give us, because we don't know the exact, timeline, but we are already in the process. For instance, we already have our ADI money. We are in the process of doing which is what the commissioners, you agreed on the consent agenda, is some items to get the process forward to finalize our contract for our grants. We are also doing lots of things of working with our partners. We're working on getting our RFPS together for our engineering. So we are doing some very actionable items that are markable, that puts us on track to break ground in summer of 2020. So yeah, we are moving forward vigorously.
Along those same lines, another question that I was asked, and I think I answered properly, but I was told that we were not including illumination in any of our phases with fiber optics, and we weren't talking with them.
That is an absolute falsity. From the very get-go, I've had conversations with Illuminations and with Teresa Taylor and Sunshine from their Economic Development Division. In fact, we both got our planning grants on the exact same meeting. And I've worked with them to actually help them do their feasibility. They're using actually the same GIS company that we used, Ascent, to do their pole design. We've also had discussions, or are still in agreement, that our two networks will connect. So we have our segment 2 pretty much stopping at the casino on Slater Road, where the Illuminations will have theirs coming out from there. And we're so far, I mean, that's preliminary, but we have identified, connecting points. So we talk on a constant basis. I'm due to actually have a meeting on this and many other things with them, with Illumination. So we have had several conversations about this, and yeah, we're in complete partnership.
And that was my answer to the folks that asked.
Yeah.
I would second that. I spoke with Teresa on this just a couple weeks ago, and she had lots of positive things to say about our relationship and how we are really designing these to be in partnership to work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Gina.
Yeah, you bet.
Another thing that I have refuted in public is that the Port of Bellingham does not do enough to get grant money. So I asked Rob if he could give me the figures over the last couple of years, and he gave me the figures over the last 4 years, and it's excess of $30 million that the Port of Bellingham has gone after in grants and received to help do what we do for the people of Whatcom County. So I wouldn't call in the excess of $30 million sitting on our hands not going after grants. We do have an issue, and maybe Frank can clarify this for us. There's some wording that has to be changed, and we can go after further grant funding, but right now we're prohibited by law, I assume, to go after these funds. And I believe the WPPA is working on.
Yeah, I'm looking at Gina because I think this was an economic development one. Who were we just talking to? We met with federal delegation. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Larson's office. And yeah, we were looking for some funding for broadband, I believe it was. And some legislation has to change so that we can go that route. But
So Gina Stark again. We were meeting with Senator Del Benny about this, but I've had conversations with Larson, and in fact, I was just on Monday in Olympia at a USDA broadband meeting and did bring it up that, and it's not necessarily the port per se, it's just the way the USDA language is written and their level of coverage. For instance, it's required that 90% of the proposed area can have speeds no bigger than 10 up, 1 down. Well, that's pretty much dark age, right? We have pockets of that. We don't have that proposed area. So there's certain things in their eligibility that knocks us and a lot of other ports or jurisdictions that are doing larger projects that prohibit us from using and accessing those federal funds. But we're still having conversations, and so have not given hope on them yet.
Right, so we are trying to access those funds through the legal avenues.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted to bring these things up is I don't believe that the general public really understands the depth of what this port does behind the scenes. We can't tell the folks everything that's going on all the time, or we would probably never get anything done. So this is broadcast on YouTube, and I wanted to bring these things forward so that people can look at this meeting that have questions and understand the depth that the Port of Bellingham, the depth we're involved in here and the things we do behind the scenes, because everything is not up front. And it's best to nip these things in the bud, and I hope that's what I'm doing this evening by having things explained, is that so people understand and there's no misconception about what the port does or doesn't do. So thank you to staff for the explanations this evening, and that's all I have.
If I can, do a 3-minute update on the bike park. I think will
Yes,
save us
sir.
some phone calls coming in. There's a lot of interest in this subject, and we have closed it, so Mike's going to do I'm challenging him to 3 minutes or less.
Get your timer going over there.
Thanks, Rob. Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Good evening, Commission. Yeah, we wanted to give just a quick update on the waterfront bike park. It's temporarily closed right now. We were planning a grand opening on September 28th. That's a little bit up in the air right now, so we just wanted to give folks a brief update on what's happening and where we are. As you know, we put a lot of time, effort, and work into activating the downtown waterfront, a tremendous amount of cleanup, tremendous amount of planning. And after all that, we had a giant gravel lot that's going to be like that for many years. So many people in the community, the commission was interested in how can we activate that, get people down to the waterfront in the near term rather than wait until the development happens in the long term. So this just shows a map. We have the plan where the future park's going to go through the downtown waterfront. Maybe potentially, what are activities we could do to get that area going. It was in conversations with a local group from WMBC Walk and Mountain Bike Coalition, talking about maybe doing a bike and brew festival down on the waterfront, that the idea for some sort of pump track down on the waterfront to get bikers down there came about. That was probably 4 years ago, and then the concept evolved from there. As you know, we opened the waterfront bike park on Labor Day. Tremendous amount of interest. Just to give you a flavor for that, we put a video announcing the opening on our Facebook page, had over 30,000 people reached, and more importantly, over 7,000 engagements. So saw heavy use by all types of riders. If you look at the picture, this could replace the Bellingham concrete wall as the kind of the iconic picture of Whatcom County. Just a tremendous amount of bikers. We did have, just a quick story, I know I'm on the 3-minute rule, but did have one unhappy customer. I was down there, meeting with some guys that were building it, watering it, and saw a dad, this kid must have been about 2 years old riding a little Strider bike, and he's like, okay, 5 minutes, okay, 2 minutes, okay, 1 minute. I'm watching him, the kid's not going anywhere, and he's like, okay, time to go. Kid's not going anywhere. He finally pulls him off the bike, and the kid just starts bawling, sobbing into tears. So it's after so many years of seeing the site completely either unused or just heavy industrial activity, to see the amount of people down there since that bike park opened has been really cool, and especially with the younger kids, parents taking them down and having stuff to do. So in probably next week, you'll see some picnic tables down there. But as I mentioned, we had a couple huge rain events, so I took my daughter down to investigate, and you can see the puddles of water on the pump track. She was super happy. It's actually fun to have your kids excited about something that you're working on. And so anyway, the heavy rain did cause some significant erosion. We're working on that. The track does need to dry before we can repair it. We'll provide updates on the port website and our Facebook page as to the status of that. And we put a hold on our September 28th grand opening event. We're going to wait until Monday, kind of look at, if the track's dried out enough, where we are with repairing the track, what the weather's looks like, to see to see the status. But we will have a party. I'm not sure if it's going to be the September 28th, but it will be a fun, good event. One thing of note, we've been talking about, could we name this something better than Waterfront Bike Park? We do have a proposed name for you guys. This is a big chipper wheel that, when GP was doing the demolition, went over to Northwest Recycling. If you go past on Holly, this is just one of the massive kind of industrial icons left over from the site. This was one of the chipper wheels that turned those giant logs into, a pile of wood chips in about, 10 seconds. So we were thinking the grinder could be a name. And the grinder is a mountain biking term for a long uphill climb. Also, for anyone that's worked on this project over the years, it's been a long uphill climb as we try to get the waterfront activated. But we've had conversations with Northwest Recycling about reacquiring this piece of infrastructure instead of, scrap metal in it, putting it back on the site where it belongs, and, putting some sort of name near the front of the bike park. So
we paid them to take it away, and we're gonna.
Oh, I think it was actually Georgia Pacific as part of their demolition, and then when we acquired the property, we kind of put a halt to that and preserved a bunch of the industrial icons.
I'm in the business. This is what I love about being in the business. Somebody pays you to take care of it, and then somebody else pays you to take it back. It's great.
The only question on the table is it Grinder Bike Park or the Grinder Bike Park?
I'd say the grinders just points at it a lot harder. It's the grinder. Other than, hey, it's just the grinder part. No, this is the grinder part.
I don't have a dog in that hunt. So I'll keep the.
No, you just want to take it away and sell it.
Thanks, Mike. Well, perfect. Thanks, Commissioners.
Anything further from anyone? Anyone, staff have anything they'd like to add? Anything? Anything? Nothing? Going once, going twice? Closed.